Good evening and welcome to the Top 25 Rundown, presented by the Sportscast. Today is February 8th, 2023. If you haven't yet, please subscribe on all your channels YouTube, Twitter, Twitch.tv, and Apple Podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review. It'll help us out tremendously. You can listen to us on your smart speaker, Play Sportscast. Visit us on the sportscast.net. Also follow us on Twitter at the Sportscast1 and check out our Sportscast in the iOS App Store. Hello, my name is Alan West. Welcome to the Top 25 Rundown. Once again, I am joined tonight by Bob Alvis, high school sports commentator, public address announcer, host of Sports Buffet, and multiple other jobs and activities. How you doing tonight, Bob?
I'm well, Alan. How are you, sir?
Oh, just ready to go through a rundown of all the top 25 for the men and women's basketball. Also looking at men and women's hockey and a quick look across as well, since the men's season started. The women's as soon as well.
Is it windy where you are? Because the trees are actually blowing tonight.
I guess it is. I didn't realize that, but yeah, I do see the trees are moving a little bit tonight. I was a little impressed. So we'll see if the streak keeps going or not. But Bob, we had a rivalry last weekend that is near and dear to your heart. We
Yeah,
had
Duke. Anytime Duke and UNC get together, call me in.
that was why when I realized about that, I was like, yes, because we were going to do a talk about the Senior Bowl, but we're going to probably reschedule that for another week. Tyler unfortunately could not come on, but because of that, when I saw Duke and UNC, I was like, Bob, because you being a huge Duke fan, I know you didn't get to watch a whole lot of the game. What did you think about the highlights that you saw?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, the highlights got to be Derek Lively. I mean, to come away with his total. I mean, yeah, he only had 4 points, but he had 14 boards and 8 blocks. Kind of reminds me of Elizabeth Williams when she was coming out of high school in Virginia. I want to say Princess Anne, and she went to Duke. She wasn't really the offensive machine at that point, but defense and rebounds wins championships. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but defense and rebounds, that's what wins you games. And I'll tell you what, for Lively to do that, I mean, not everybody's going to get. And it's funny when you look at the guy's average; he's only averaging 4 points a game. I'm sure John Shire would take 4 points a game if he could even sniff 14 and 8 on a semi-regular basis.
Absolutely. And the other thing is with that, 8 blocks is the most that have ever happened in a Duke and UNC game, which I thought was pretty impressive. I mean, I'm going to give a little bit of comparison and see if you can work with me on this comparison, okay?
I'm ready.
If you were going to go for a way too early comparison, the way that those numbers sound, they're almost kind of like what Bill Russell did when he was at college and even in the pros a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I think of it almost in, too, is like video game numbers. I mean, if you're playing your old school like me, Nintendo, or the PS4s or the Nintendo Switch or whatever, and you have a basketball game, when you're looking at those type of numbers, those are video game numbers. And for, Lively to pull that off on, a real game, so to speak, a real game, I think that's got to be tip of the hat. But you're
Well,
right.
I mean,
Very similar to Bill Russell.
I would say not only was it a real game, it's one of the biggest games of the year. I mean, they were at home and they were playing Carolina, and Carolina had a 2 game winning streak, I believe, against them. I mean, the last time we saw them when they played there, they gave Coach K the final home loss of his career, which, not gonna lie, I appreciate that a little bit just because, well, I was happy to see Coach K go, and I wanted to see how Carolina could do because Coach K was very mad when he did his speech afterwards, but he seemed to understand how to be pretty successful in the tournament if I was watching correctly.
Yeah, I don't think that win is what's going to determine Coach K's lifetime accomplishments. I don't think that loss against North Carolina takes you out.
The one thing that was impressive to me was it was the first time in over 60 years that Dean Smith or Coach K weren't coaching one of those teams.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really weird. I think at one point when people talked about UVA and Virginia Tech in the same year when they would have two different coaches, or I mean, take your high school rivalries in Virginia or take them anywhere. When you see two schools that have coaches, stay for a long time, 10 years or more, and then that one year you get, hey, where's Coach K? Oh, he's not here. Where's, I don't want to say where's Dean Smith because unfortunately he's deceased. But I mean, Dean Smith and Coach K was the battle forever. Then it became Coach K and Roy. That was a battle for a good long while. Now, when you've got Hubert Davis and John Shire, it doesn't take the luster off because it's still Duke and Carolina, but it's really like, that's weird. I mean, and granted, those are two alums. So, I mean, both schools have kept it in the family. But, Hubert Davis is older than Shire by, I think, probably at least 10 to 15 years. So, yeah, but to answer your question that you didn't ask, it's kind of weird to see.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask, but I knew that you were gonna catch it and run with it before I got to it. So you know what? That's okay. That being said, though, did you notice that the next two games that North Carolina and Duke both played, they both lost?
Yep.
I
Well, and
mean,
that's kind of what I was going to hit on too. If you're going to go beat Carolina, you can't lose to Miami, and not just it's not like it was a close 2-point loss.
mhm, mhm.
22.
Yeah, well, they had been down at least 10 or 15 points most of the game. I think that they had gotten as close. I want to say it was under 10 at one point, but then Miami just was able to pull away and then Duke at Wake Forest. That
Yep.
was a signature win that Wake Forest really needed. So, I mean, for them to get that, even though they basically had the same conference record as North Carolina, since we're coming up to tournament time, that could really put a dent in North Carolina's hope for the first round bye.
Yeah, and I think you touched on the Duke Wake Forest game there a minute ago. I mean, that could have been a huge win for Wake. That could have been, because if you're a school like that, and we've talked about this before, you got to have something on the resume that's going to look good. And anytime you beat Duke, I mean, unless it was the year where Coach K's back prevented him from coaching, and it was Pete Gaudette Duke, that may not be the best Duke team ever to be assembled. And Duke was that, I think they were in the 8-9 game one year against like Eastern Michigan or Central Michigan, one of the directional Michigan schools. But when you're not a top 4 seed, but still it's Duke and North Carolina. I mean, when you beat a Duke or North Carolina, can't look bad.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, I think in a way after that game, it was just a letdown for both teams just because how they had kind of laid it out on the court for that game. And so then the next game they were kind of gassed, even though you would have thought they would have been prepped and ready. But as we talked about a few weeks ago, for when Duke walked in against Miami, Larinaga was ready. He had his game plan set up, and I mean, they ran it to perfection.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, give Miami credit and give these schools credit. I think when you have blue bloods like we talked about in the past with Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, so on and so forth, the blue bloods make everybody else better. And I think I believe if you look at the ACC right now, the two teams that are at the top are the teams that were picked like 11th and 12th in the preseason. So it just shows the media members don't know anything. And B, that's why, no, I'm just kidding about that part, but that's why we play the games. I mean, because Clemson was not picked high. Pitt was not picked high. They're both 10-3 with a share of conference lead with Virginia right now. So, I mean, go figure.
That was definitely a surprise. And when I was taking a look on the top 25 scoreboard, because we had gone through it for Wednesday of last week, so hitting on Tuesday, the next day, Houston played Wichita State and won 70-61, and Arizona beat Oregon 91-76. So, I mean, you're starting to see that both of those teams are trying to stay ahead. I mean, that was for Arizona. That was a huge Pac-12 matchup, and I mean, you're just watching how everyone's getting ready for tournament time.
Yeah, you really needed to get your red pen out this week if you were looking at the top 25 because there was a lot of missteps. But I mean, that's going to happen. I mean, I think one thing to take a look at is this is not college football. I mean, this is not the one game a week type thing. This is 2, sometimes 3 games a week. So yeah, I mean, but with that being said, a lot of red marks on the top 25 scoreboard this week.
Yep, we're about to hit some of them because on Friday, San Diego State did beat Boise State 52-72, but Saturday, now that was a day where we had probably the game of the week, honestly, in my opinion. We had Indiana upset Purdue 79-74.
Yep.
And I mean, Zachary Edey, he had a great game, 33-8, 18 rebounds and 3 blocks. But against Jackson Davis, who's been a huge factor for Indiana, he had 25 and 7 and 5 blocks, and he led him to victory. Because that right there is probably going to be probably a quarterfinal or semifinal, at least in the Big Ten tournament. If it gets to be higher, that would be great. But just because of how this game was, I would say right now this was probably top 3 or 4 for the game for the Big Ten this year for men's basketball.
Yeah, and those rivalries, those state rivalries, I'll call it the Indiana Purdue's, the Michigan States, the Michigans. I mean, we can talk rankings all we want to, but I mean, at some point you've got to play the throw the records out the window card in that one. So yeah, it's definitely an upset, no doubt. I mean, anytime the number 1 team goes down, it's an upset. But at the same time, Indiana's a good basketball team. Mike Woodson's done really good things at Indiana, and I give Indiana credit for pulling off that upset against Purdue.
Absolutely, and going through the rest of the games that day, we had a few more upsets, but we had number 2 Tennessee. They did beat Auburn 46-43, which that's I think the lowest scoring game in the SEC this year. Then Alabama, they played LSU and won 79-69. Arizona beat Oregon State 82-54. So in 2 games, they beat both teams in Oregon. So that's pretty good. Then we had the upset for the in-state rivalry here with Virginia Tech beating Virginia 74-68.
Yeah, big win for the Hoos. I mean, we talk about, everybody is trying to improve their rankings right now and improve their seeding. And I think for Virginia, again, a lot of emotion is thrown into those state rivalry games. So Virginia to beat Virginia Tech and, look
No,
good doing
Virginia
so.
Tech. Virginia Tech.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Virginia.
Virginia Tech to beat
Virginia.
Virginia and look good doing so. It's a win the Hokies needed. I apologize. Yeah, I'm with you. And you got to wonder how Virginia's going to bounce back because I mean, I know they've bounced back since then, but this week they got Duke, and that's a matchup where you get hyped up for. So yeah, I apologize to all our Hokie listeners out there because we don't need hate mail coming from that. But what a big win for the Hokies.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can deal with it, but I'd rather not get it this time. Although, for the Big 12 that on Saturday, you had Texas upsetting Kansas State, even though Texas had the better record in the Big 12, 69-66. And you had Iowa State upsetting Kansas, 68-53. Iowa State at home, they are 12-0.
Yeah, the Iowa State team definitely hard to beat in Ames, and if you're Iowa State, you can't coast off these wins. I mean, beating Kansas is a good win, but you just can't take it in and say that's enough. That's all we're doing because that's a big win, but that's also a win to where you hope it can provide momentum.
Absolutely that, and then also we want to make sure that they can use that's coming into tournament time for seeding as well. So
yep.
Then we see that UCLA beat Washington State 76-52. UCLA this year is perfect at home as well.
Yeah,
With
it's
13
always tough to go to Pauley Pavilion, without a doubt. So, give UCLA credit. I mean, I think a lot of people sleep on the Pac-10 literally because
Mhm.
it is a late night conference. But I mean, Pac-10 always has some good basketball, and it's not even the Pac-10. Let me rephrase that. Pac-12. I'm going back to my old days. But
Mhm.
I mean, some of those conferences that you don't see as much, but you just see at tournament time, and you'll be like, man, where have they been all year? Well, they've been
Yep.
where they've been all year. They've been a good team. So, yeah, I think Pac-12 UCLA ranked 7th in the country with a 19-4 record, and Arizona right in front of them, but behind them in the Pac-12 standings at 10-3. What a job Tommy Lloyd's done since coming over from Gonzaga as Mark Few's assistant. I mean, Arizona, who I'm sure you're going to touch on, has won 6 straight. They don't have anybody ranked in terms of big schools left on the schedule except for UCLA. That's in Pauley Pavilion, 1st of March. But, those games where you're not playing a ranked team, they almost scare me even more.
Understand, because then it's like, hey, if we lose, then we're going to go down. So now it's just trying to basically, like, I guess Jim Valvano said it the best: survive in advance.
Yep, it's easy to beat the ranked teams because I mean, you take a look at it this way. In any sport that you like to follow, Alan, when do you
Mhm.
see teams get up the most? It's normally when they're playing good competition. But when you have
Absolutely.
a team that you should beat, that's the games, and we call it the trap game. Those are the games that scare me more.
Absolutely. And going into that, we also had Baylor beat Texas Tech, which was 89-62. But then we had a trap game, just like you said, where St. Mary's beat Gonzaga in overtime 78-70. Gonzaga has had 2 losses in the WCC this year. I believe they're both to St. Mary's. But St. Mary's is perfect this year at 10-0.
Yeah, I mean the Gales are playing very good basketball, 21-4 overall. They lost 3 in a row earlier in the year, but one of those was to the number 1 team in the nation, the Houston Cougars. So I mean, I don't want to say throw that out, but yeah, I mean, anytime you beat Gonzaga normally once, that's an accomplishment. But if you can get Gonzaga a couple times, and that's really, really an accomplishment. They'll have the chance to do that at Gonzaga later in February. But when we say later in February is going to be here before we know it.
Exactly. We only got 2 or 3 weeks away for that. And going down the scoreboard a little more, we had Marquette play Butler. Marquette won 60-52. TCU then got upset by Oklahoma State 79-73. So that's definitely gonna mess with the Big 12 standings a little bit. Number 16 Xavier beat St. John's 96-71. Florida Atlantic beat Charlotte 67-52. Then Miami had the other ACC upset of the week, at least on Saturday, when they beat Clemson 78-74, putting them
Yeah.
right back in the thick of the conference, the regular season, and for seeding as well for the conference tournament.
Yeah, one thing you touched on about Marquette, they won 5 straight. I don't think a lot of people really remember the coach of Marquette right now is Shaka Smart. And Shaka had a great deal of success at Virginia Commonwealth. The
Mm-hmm.
success did not really carry over to Texas as much. That's a tough place to win. But, Marquette lost their last game to UConn. But anytime you're facing UConn, and again, UConn's been one of those blue bloods that Jim Calhoun was there. I think Jim Calhoun is honestly an underrated coach. Then it went to Kevin Ollie. Now it's with Dan Hurley. UConn had a triple double in that game against Marquette. Tristan Newton had 12 points, 12 assists, 10 boards. UConn's not a team to sleep on. Their record is probably not what they want it to be. But, Marquette, I don't think enough people probably are giving Marquette enough, eyes on them,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a top 10 team. It's a team coached by Shaka, and Shaka's style of play is very attractive to a lot of people.
Absolutely. I didn't even realize that Shaka Smart was the head coach till I learned it earlier this week. And I mean, I was glad to hear that he has another coaching job after what happened at Texas, just because like you said at VCU, he was he made them one of the scariest places to play
Yep.
while he was a coach there, and they kept him there for at least 5 or 6 years when a lot of other teams wanted him. So I'm glad to see that he's doing that. And let's be honest, if he does well at Marquette and for another 2 or 3 years, he's going to be back at another big job again. There's no doubt in my mind about it.
Yeah, and I think one thing is, the grass is not always greener on the other side. I think that Shaka would be almost I don't want to say fool, but a little silly to leave a school again to where, again, I don't want to say you can be a god, but at Marquette, you probably have lifetime immunity. At VCU, there would have been lifetime immunity after that
Right.
Final Four run. So I don't know if I was Shaka, I would leave again. But like you talked about, you certainly have the options.
Well, I mean, a lot of the last coaches at Marquette, when they've left, they've been able to transition that to a bigger conference job. I want to say that Tom Crean was one of the coaches who had
Yep.
been from Marquette, and he went from there to Indiana, even though they didn't work out the way he wanted. So, I mean, that's just one as an example. But
Yeah, and I mean, even Shaka, real quick. Shaka takes VCU to the national Final Four in 2011. Then in 2012, lost in the second round or the round of 32. But I mean, still, if at that point you are Shaka Smart, you still are going to get lifetime immunity, even if you lose in the round of 32 for the rest of your life, just about, because people don't expect VCU, people don't expect George Mason, people don't expect the smaller conference schools to make a run to the Final Four, or in some cases even the Sweet 16.
oh yeah, no. I mean, that's one of the things of watching how he was a coach there. And you just knew it's like I said when we talked about Jim Larinaga, George Mason.
Mm-hmm.
You knew that come tournament time, if they didn't lose in the conference tournament, it was almost a guarantee they would make it past the first round. And it just would be how far would they get before something would happen.
If we ever get bored, and since obviously don't know the difference between Virginia and Virginia Tech, we should really, kind of quiz me on, or quiz anybody, quiz somebody on who is coaching in the top 25 right now and name each school. And I guarantee you, unless it's a true diehard hardcore where ESPN is stuck on their television, batteries are out of the remote control, I will bet you most people cannot get 20 out of 25.
I'm pretty sure I can't honestly, but that's why I always try to look on the internet so I can make sure that I find which teams are. Because yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know most of the coaches, but that's why I always try to make sure I do a little extra research before we come on and check on everything.
Yeah, if I get an open book, I might be able to nail 21. But if you have it as a time test, if the internet's going slow that day, I'm in trouble.
You know what? You and me, we will work on doing that sometime off the year. How about that?
That sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. Well, the last game that happened on that Saturday was UConn defeating Georgetown 68-62. And I mean Bob, I'm gonna give Patrick Ewing to the end of the year, but it's not looking good for him. He is unfortunately he's underperforming, and Georgetown being the blue blood that they are, you gotta think that when they fired John Thompson III after the record that he had, watching this, I think John Thompson the second's got to be rolling in his grave right now.
Yeah, and I think we probably have to stop calling Georgetown a blue blood at this point. I'm totally with you. I understand where you're coming from with it. But I mean, Georgetown, I don't know when you lose the blue blood credential, but the relevancy of Georgetown is slipping a lot. And Patrick Ewing has been there for 6 years. His record is 74-102. That ain't good.
I mean, with all due respect, I know he got the college job, but there was a reason why he was not so every time he would try to become a coach in the NBA, there was a reason why he was only an assistant coach.
Yeah, a lot of people have always said Patrick Ewing doesn't interview well. Well, something's going wrong in college. I don't know if it's Patrick Ewing doesn't recruit well. I don't know if it's Patrick Ewing's game management, but I'm just looking right here. First year, 15 and 15, 19 and 14. If 19 and 14 is your best record at a school, and the school is in a Power Five conference, 6 years is generous in terms of how long you've been there. So, I mean, most schools, and you got to think Georgetown too is a Power Five that does not have any other sport in Division I to where it gets the notoriety. I mean, if you ask anybody about Georgetown, first name that comes to mind is going to be John Thompson, probably, or Patrick Ewing. We can get a little bit deeper down into the list, but if you tell me name one other person that that's going to Georgetown,
Allen Iverson.
but he played basketball. Name one other person from Georgetown that is not affiliated with the basketball team. My point has been made.
Yep. Your point is made.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, athletically, and don't get me wrong, Georgetown is a very good school. They probably wouldn't let me anywhere near it. But I mean, at the same time, your basketball team is getting a lot of the recognition, and that's kind of your recruiter, because you got to think about it this way too. And I'm not going to get off on a tangent here real quick, but even when Virginia Tech went really good at football during the Michael Vick days, that's when more people started applying to the university as a whole. And when your admission goes up, that's a good thing. How does the admission go up? Honestly, success of sports teams, I think, helps a lot. I mean, name me who performed the best in the SATs. No one knows unless you're like really digging for that information. But people know who, they know your blue bloods, they know your Final Fours. And when you have teams that don't perform well for years in a row, kind of takes a little bit of luster off.
Well,
By the way, Paul Tagliabue went to Georgetown.
Okay, yep, that's true. That's true. I will say that when it comes to for Patrick Ewing players, they had a basketball player there who was a Mac McClung.
Yep.
Who I believe was a top 25 prospect.
Yep.
I think he made it 1 or 2 years there before he transferred to Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And he was known as a guy who could dunk.
Absolutely.
So when you're getting him to leave Georgetown, that doesn't say much positive for you.
Yeah, Mac McClung out of Gate City High School in Southwest Virginia did go to Georgetown, wasn't there a ton. Now he plays in the G League, and I think he is the first G Leaguer to be, I don't want to say nominated, but the first G Leaguer to be invited into the dunk contest.
Yeah, no, that does not surprise me one bit. Because after seeing, I had watched his dunk videos before and just knowing he had been at Georgetown, but then I saw his transfer, I was like, wait a second, why would he transfer?
Right. But that's another topic for another time. I mean,
exactly.
Because with the way people, leave, and if I'm not getting, my attention, or if I'm not performing like I think I can, I'm just going to go start somewhere else. Well, just because you start somewhere else doesn't mean that your problems normally go with you. Your style of play normally goes with you. So I think transferring is wonderful if you want to do that. But I think if you're looking for, the bad to become good, more often than not, I don't think that's happening.
True. I mean, it's more just you can tell if the coach is doing well with how many players stay compared to how many would leave.
Absolutely.
And so you've been watching more people leave than stay, and the people that they have been getting hasn't been the 5 stars that before they were used to getting more often than not. But on Sunday, Houston beat Temple 81-65. Then we're jumping into the games happen on Monday, where Kansas beat Texas 88-80. And then, like we talked about, Duke beat Miami. Miami beat Duke, pardon me, 81-59.
I've got you doing it now based on
Yeah,
my earlier.
Yep, you got me. Yeah, I realized that right after. I was like, yep, I pulled a Bob right there. So
pretty soon we're going to have Georgetown win the national championship.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. There's not enough. There's not enough special beverages in the world that's going to make that happen, sir. I'm sorry.
I can misspeak, but normally it doesn't go that deep.
Fair enough. Let's see. On Tuesday's batch of games, you had Virginia play NC State, and they won 60-53. Marquette lost to UConn 87-72, where you talk about for Mr. Nelson with his triple double. And then Kansas State beat TCU 82-61. And Indiana continued on its winning ways against Rutgers 66-60. And actually, Trace Jackson Davis, he got 2,000 career points in that game. It's pretty good.
Yeah, 2001 game. Man, people don't do that.
Yeah, no, but he got 2001 career. And speaking of that, actually, we're gonna jump on a tangent for 1 minute. And I think you can agree with me on this for one. I'm not going to say that this person is the best player in the NBA, but LeBron James last night broke Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's career scoring record in the NBA. It was on a fadeaway, which I give him credit that he broke the record. And I hope that he continues to keep doing well, and I hope that the goal that he has talked about where he wants to play basketball with his kids, I hope that can happen. How do you feel about that record being broken?
I mean, all records are made to be broken, right?
True.
So, I mean, I think like bringing up LeBron James is like almost getting a Republican and a Democrat to just argue over senseless stuff, because I think so many people want to say Michael Jordan is the best. And I think so many people want to say LeBron James is the best. Then we can almost get the Kobe people into the fray. I think they're all good. And I think each one of them has different skill sets that may be better than others. I mean, is LeBron a GOAT? Okay, sure. But for people that lived in my generation, Michael Jordan would step on your throat to win a game. So I'm going off my generation of when I was watching. Now, if you talk to the kids that, are coming up through high school or early college now, LeBron, Steph Curry, those are the guys. So I think it just depends on when you paid attention, when you were alive, things of that sort. But let's not lose sight of the fact that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a very, very good player. A lot of people will say, well, Kareem had 4 years in college, so he didn't get the jump start that LeBron did. I would argue that if LeBron is still playing and this is probably not scoring record as much, but if LeBron is still playing at the same level he's playing at now, that's phenomenal. Because the other thing too is, LeBron came in as a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid in the league, whatever it was. Those legs have got a lot of miles on them right now too. The same thing used to be said about Kevin Garnett, because I think some people would be like, well, he's only 30-some years old. He's not that old. Yeah, I get that. But he came into the league as a high school senior. The miles on the car started right then. You know what I'm saying? So I think LeBron is a very good player. And I think it's almost going to be a situation of Father Time LeBron is going to start going into the tank when we have to see it. I don't think you can almost predict of when LeBron is going to start underperforming.
Yeah, with respect to that, I will say that LeBron was able to accomplish the feat in 150 less games than Kareem, and he also his scoring average, he's averaged over 20 points. I think it's 20.9 points a game for his career, which that is pretty impressive as well. So
Absolutely. I mean, it's a situation to where I think when you talk about, and I'm not saying you, but I think when you ask people, well, who's better, LeBron, Jordan, or Kobe, or let's just go LeBron, Jordan, and Kobe. You're almost starting a fight to where somebody could say all three of them are really good. But if I say LeBron's the best, then I said Jordan and Kobe stunk. I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. So I think that's where you're getting people into these boats of I think, to me, in my opinion, after LeBron, Jordan, and Kobe, I think there's a little bit of a drop. However, people that saw Wilt scored 100 in a game.
Yes, he did.
So, I mean, there are going to be people that are going to say Wilt. There are going to be people that are going to say, I mean, I was looking at it the other day. Karl Malone was a really, really, really good player. He had a lot of points. So, I mean, that's you snicker, but that's one thing. But I mean, where do we stop this? Where do we stop the list type of thing in terms of that argument? I mean, so yeah. But hey, LeBron, you got to give him credit. I'm not the biggest LeBron fan, but you've got to give him credit for what he has accomplished. And I don't know when he stops accomplishing.
So here's how I'm going to end this debate for that right now. Since we are the top 25 rundown, here's what I noticed, okay? For the names that you mentioned, for LeBron, Kobe, Jordan, Kareem, and you can even say Wilt. 3 out of 5 of those had the luxury or accomplishment of not only being NBA champions, but NCAA champions. Because I believe Wilt won a championship at Kansas, Kareem won 2 or 3 at UCLA, and Jordan won 1 at Carolina. So all I would say is for them, since they did go to college, they were able to have a chance to get their game even more ready for the NBA. So that way, when they were there, they became the players that we consider the higher echelon of the players. Now, that doesn't mean that LeBron or Kobe weren't able to accomplish great things already, but you could say that had they gone to college as well, they could have done I'll give Carmelo Anthony as an example. He went to Syracuse the 1 year. He won the title. Then he went to the NBA. The difference is, I think that for Kobe, since his dad was already a pro player, that's why he knew that he could make the jump to the NBA. Whereas LeBron, he had a lot of people giving him confidence, and he was able to show that he was ready. So they didn't go to college, which that was a shame because it would have been even better to watch them in college to see what else they could have done. And let's be honest, the NCAA tournaments with them in it, that would have been even crazier, in my opinion. But we'll just have to basically say what if and be thankful for what we do have, which, you know what? We're pretty lucky in the fact that we have for a lot of good competition, even though we don't always know what's coming up. And to be thankful and to just watch and see what predictions will happen next is a great thing. And just looking at tonight's games, Alabama is winning almost by 30 against Florida, so they're about to win their game. And Oklahoma and Baylor's up by 9 on Oklahoma. And now we have San Diego State going into Utah State. It's 35-25, 3:22 in the first half. Creighton beat Seton Hall today, 75-62. Vanderbilt hit a 3 at the buzzer, and they beat Tennessee tonight, 66-65. West Virginia upset Iowa State, 76-71. Houston beat Tulsa, 80-42. Providence beat Georgetown, 74-62. And Alabama has just gone final 97-69. So you got 2 teams in the top 12 that just lost. So like you said, Bob, we would have to do a little bit more work with our red pens today, just seeing how the rankings are going to go, because even though they're here now, depending on how it goes the rest of the week, you could drop as few as maybe 2 or 3 or as many as 10, depending on what happens this weekend.
Sure. Yep. I don't want to say you don't have I think you got to have the balance if you're a team or a fan of, you can't get so goo goo and gaga over rankings that you let it affect your vision of what your team's got to do going forward and things of that sort. So yeah, I'm with you.
But yeah, no, that's the rundown for the men's basketball. Let's take a quick look at the rankings for the moment, just because, like we said, we're going to have two teams. We're going to have Tennessee and Iowa Iowa State drop. So, but until they do, we have Purdue at number 1, Houston at number 2, Alabama at number 3, Arizona at number 4, Texas at number 5, Tennessee at number 6, UCLA at number 7, UVA number 8, Kansas number 9, Marquette number 10, Iowa State number 11, Kansas State number 12, Xavier number 13, Baylor number 14, St. Mary's number 15, Gonzaga number 16, TCU number 17, Indiana number 18, Miami number 19, Providence number 20, UConn number 21, NC State number 22, Creighton number 23, Rutgers number 4, and San Diego State number 25. I mean, that's compared to what we thought at the beginning of the year, not even close to what we had predicted for the top 25. Which I guess we could say
Predicting
that's
the
part
top
of the
25
magic.
makes us all look silly.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the magic and mystique.
Right.
So that we can see what happens. Which I'm definitely glad to see, and I'm hoping that it keeps up, but it just is going to be close this year. And just seeing how the rest of the year is going to unfold, that's going to be probably one of the biggest things. And within about the next 2 weeks, we're probably going to need to start taking a look at tournament seedings for the conference tournament. Just see if we can figure out who's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4 to understand about it. So, but I'm looking, Bob. Let's switch over to women's basketball. Okay,
Sure.
we have an upset tonight, a big upset. UConn lost to Marquette, 59-52. UConn has had 4 losses this year. That was their first loss in the Big East this year. I can't think of in the past 8 to 10 years where UConn has lost more than 1 game, maybe 2 games the entire year.
Yeah. I mean, there was that one year, or I shouldn't say that one year, but there were a few years, I think, where Louisville and Notre Dame were both really good. And that could have been, complicated for UConn. But I also saw a stat that was really interesting is this is like the first time since, I think, 1993 that UConn has lost back-to-back games.
That is insane. Texas also beat Texas Tech 81-70. Georgetown lost to Villanova 82-53, and Ohio State beats Minnesota 93-63. Now I want to take a look at the games on, see if it was Saturday or Sunday, just because I want to talk about the Sunday. It was Sunday. It was South Carolina. They beat UConn 81-77. And right after that, Stanford was upset by Washington. Stanford was number 2 at the time, and they lost to Washington. That's got to be one of the biggest upsets of the year, honestly, just because of how Stanford's been playing really good basketball. Sure, they've lost 3 games this year, but normally, because of how the coach of Stanford has their team, they're the highest ranked team with that many losses.
Yeah, I mean, Tara Vanderveer and Stanford, they have done a great job traditionally year in, year out. The funny thing about Stanford, and I believe I'm right on this, is if you look back into the history of time with Stanford, they are the only 1 seed in women's basketball to lose to a 16.
I want to say that happened. Was that a few years ago?
It happened in the men's a few years ago, and I can tell you who did that.
Yeah, that was UVA and UMBC.
Not Virginia Tech, by the way, University of Virginia.
Yeah, it was UVA
But but
against
I
the
want to
Recruiters.
say Stanford, and it was Stanford and Harvard. And I'm gonna look it up real quick on the old Google machine here
Go
and
ahead.
see. But yeah, that's been, to my knowledge, the only women's upset in the history of 1 versus 16. It happened back in, let's see, happened before Virginia. Let's see, 1998.
Okay. So that was the year the Tennessee won, and that was the year if memory serves, when I was taking a look at some history books just while I was at Liberty. That was the year when Liberty and Tennessee played each other in the undefeated matchup in the
Yep.
NCAA tournament, where Tennessee won, and I believe they won the title that year as well.
Yep. Now they
'Cause,
won through 16 is it's, to me, it's a phenomenal thing to look back through, and maybe we can talk about that at some point down the road. But I mean, the one that always sticks out to me on a men's side is Georgetown and Princeton, when Georgetown had Alonzo Mourning, and I mean Princeton had a shot to beat them at the buzzer, and we wouldn't be talking about UVA because they would have been the second team to lose. I mean, I don't even know if that, to me, and we could have to get the UVA historians on. I don't even know if that's your worst loss ever in the history of Virginia. I mean, yeah, you lost to a 16 seed, but you also lost to a Division II team when you had Ralph Sampson on the team back in the 1980s. So, but yeah, I mean, point of the whole story is 16s don't beat ones very often.
that and looking at the women's ranks as well, I do want to say that LSU, they beat Texas A&M 72-66, and Miss Reese for LSU, she's been racking up the double doubles this year. I'd say that she's definitely in the running for Women's Player of the Year besides Aaliyah Boston at South Carolina and Asia.
LSU is a very sneaky team. They're very sneaky. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
Okay.
they're a very sneaky team. They've got Kim Mulkey, who coached at Baylor
Yes.
for many, many years. I mean, LSU is a very, very sneaky team.
I think this is only her second or third year, and she's got the team that she wants this year. And I'm expecting big things, and I'm thinking that the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament between South Carolina and South Carolina and LSU, pardon me, those are going to be probably the games of the year in the conference just because of how they are. And actually, I saw that after the UConn game, Gino was trying to say that Dawn Staley and her players don't play fair. And how do you feel about that, sir?
Yeah, you poked the bear on that one with Dawn Staley, because Dawn Staley came back and responded we're playing fair. I coach a lot of phenomenal human beings. And, the thing about it, not to get on a soapbox here, Dawn Staley is a alumnus of the University of Virginia. I think UVA dropped the ball at some point, because I think, and I get it, and I say this with all due respect, it's women's basketball, so people don't go goo-goo and gaga crazy over it unless you're at Connecticut or a few other schools. But to back up the Brinks truck for Dawn Staley, probably something you're not going to do, probably something you should do, because Dawn Staley is, I think, a very, very, very good college basketball coach. And I think, I'm on the outside looking in here, and I don't need any hate mail from Gino on this one, but I think when you start beating a team, you become disliked by the teams that you're beating.
Oh yeah. That, and the other thing is, I think that we could honestly say that for women's basketball as a whole, Dawn Staley is an icon.
Yep.
Not only being successful at UVA, being successful in the WNBA, having some gold medals playing for Team USA,
Right.
and then being able to be a coach at the same time. Then when she retired from basketball, going into full-time coach at UVA, now at South Carolina, and now she's already won 2 NCAA women's championships as a coach.
It's one thing to be able to play the game. It's another thing, I think, to be able to teach the game and to coach the game. And, if you look at your great players in any sport, most of the time you're going to find they weren't good coaches. If you look at your good coaches in most sports, you're going to find they weren't very good players. I get there are exceptions to the rule, but more often than not, what I just said holds true. Dawn Staley, the unicorn in that bunch, because she's doing really good things. And, back when you were in school, back when I was in school, I don't think we would have said, yeah, South Carolina is going to be the team to beat in women's basketball.
No, no, not a chance. I mean, that's why it's even better.
Yep.
So let's
And
go ahead
let me ask you a question real quick before we
Sure.
move on. I
Go
don't
ahead.
think, I don't know, do you think people like the favorites, or do you think people like to see the favorite get unseated and then we have a new favorite?
I think it goes back and forth depending on who the school is, because there are some schools that people really want to see do well and be able to move up. So let's look at the rankings right now, and I can give you a few examples, okay? So for women's basketball, you got South Carolina at number 1 at 23-0. Then you have number 2 Indiana, which they were able to jump up, and they took over the number 2 spot at 22-1. You got LSU number 3 at 23-0. You got UConn at 21-3 right now. They're going to drop. Then you have Iowa number 5 at 19-4, and you have Stanford after their loss at number 6 at 22-3. Now the majority of ones right there, they're the ones that you would expect in women's basketball to be up that high, plus a few others. And that's just the beginning, because then when you're going straight down the rest of the list, you got Utah at 7, Maryland at 8, Duke at 9, Notre Dame at 10, Virginia Tech at 11, Michigan at 12, Ohio State at 13, North Carolina at 14, Villanova at 15, Oklahoma at 16, UCLA at Arizona at 17, UCLA at 18, Florida State at 19, Texas at 20, Iowa State at 21, NC State number 22, Gonzaga at number 23, South Florida at number 24, and Colorado at 25. So when you're looking how we just went through all that for women's basketball, other than South Florida, you would expect all those teams at one point or another to be in the top 25 with a certain ranking. Not as high as 1, but maybe say somewhere between 5 and 25. Is that fair?
I would say so.
Okay, because I mean, that's why I wanted to do that example, because Utah normally you wouldn't see them in the top 5 like they are, but Caitlin Clark is having an amazing senior season before she goes to the WNBA, and she the last 2 years has literally put Iowa on her back so that they can be successful in women's basketball. So we've
Yeah, and I
now
think it ebbs and flows too, because you got to think, Duke had gone up and down a little bit, and now that Duke has Kara Walters coaching them, they've kind of hit the upswing.
yes. And you saw how Kara talked about for the men's basketball instead of the women's basketball, which the thing I thought was interesting about that, the conference would not let her argue about that. They wouldn't let her try to change the game, which I still think that's a little bit shady, but the ACC at times, I think that they do enjoy competition. They do enjoy, I'm not gonna say they enjoy controversy, but they want to try to make the storylines better where they can. So for doing this, I think that they're gonna try to make it more intimidating or more competitive when it comes to tournament time. So that way, whoever does make the tournament, it's going to make them feel like they earned it, possibly. How do you feel about that?
Well, let me correct myself. I don't know if what I was wrong with me tonight, but I said Kara Walters, Kara Lawson.
Carol
Gosh,
Lawson, yes.
I'm going to go sit in the corner when this is done and just punish
Huh.
myself severely. But, I think anything that gets people talking is, I think, because, I mean, I'll be honest with you. If you didn't watch the games this week, one thing that you could have heard of in the men's basketball is Jim Boeheim having a fit over the NIL. I don't know if you read the story, but one of Kentucky's ushers got fired because he flipped off some Florida fans at the end of the game. Once the game had been all said and done, all the Florida fans were walking out. They were being difficult, to say the least, and flipping off people. So he just kind of flipped them towards the end. These are things that, the people who are not watching games, I guess that means me, not watching games religiously and, hit the Twitter world or the TMZ world or whatever. That's what they're hearing about. Carol Lawson talking about, hey, it was a men's ball and a women's ball, which, by the way, is quite a difference. But, I think that's kind of like where people are going, because I think, anything to get people talking about the sport is going to be a good thing, because, let's be honest, people are not talking about ACC women's basketball that much. I mean, it's just the way it is. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just the way it is. So I don't think this is a bad thing. I mean, it's bad that you can't figure out what ball to use. But I mean, for her to go on this little, I don't even want to say fit, but to go on this little diatribe about it, I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, not at all. I mean, she's being honest and she's holding the conference accountable, even though they don't really like that. But as soon as they tested and they found out, they did switch the ball at the second half. Because I did read the article by that. Apparently, the men's ball is 1.4 ounces heavier than the women's ball.
Have you ever shot a women's basketball versus a men's basketball?
I'm not sure if I have, honestly.
Go bowl and roll a 10-pounder and roll a 13.
Yep, I've done that. I've
I
done that.
mean, to me, that's the way, because it's been a long time since I've shot a basketball in any type of competitive environment. But for a person that has semi-decent strength, not Hercules strength, but semi-decent strength, and you shoot a women's basketball, it's almost like, throwing a shot put for a person maybe about 40 feet, where you can
Okay.
only throw the men's, maybe 32. It's
Okay.
heavier. The men's ball is heavier in my eyes. So if you're using a women's ball consistently and then you use a men's ball, I don't think it's like using a medicine ball, but I think it is a jump that you're going to see.
I mean, I do appreciate her taking them to task because for her, it's trying to stand up for her players. Even though they lost, she made sure it's like, hey, I'm gonna call it out if it's not right. And for her, I commend her for that, honestly.
We're both fathers. Imagine if our daughters were in a situation to where they're using some type of ball or some type of equipment that is bigger or heavier or longer, whatever.
Yep.
It's not what they're used to using. And it's, now you could argue the same thing. Well, if you play with the men's ball, you're going to get to be a better player. Hogwash. I mean, yeah, maybe so, but this is not what the intent of the game is. If it's a competition, everybody is got to be playing with the same ball. You don't give Duke the ball and say, here, I know y'all practiced with the men's ball the whole week. Here's a men's ball for you. Oh, by the way, when Florida State goes back, they get to use the women's ball again. And Lawson, to her credit, said they just beat us. They beat us with the men's ball. They beat us with the women's ball. I mean, I don't think it was sour grapes, but I think it's
Yeah.
like, to me, it's how inept can leadership be that we played with the wrong ball for a whole half.
Yeah, that's something that definitely has to be looked at. And the other thing for the ACC, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the ACC commissioner join the college football playoff committee? I want to say a year or two ago.
I think you're right about that. I
Yeah,
mean,
I believe his name is John Swafford, if memory
yep.
serves.
Yep. I think
So,
commissioners are, they're there to get blamed and they're there to get praised. But I think a lot of times in a lot of sports, you have like, deputy commissioners or people that focus
mhm,
on XYZ sport. So I don't know that John Swafford, yeah, I mean, John Swafford's going to get the calls because it looks bad on the league.
mhm.
But yeah,
We'll see how it goes. That, and I mean, also you saw how the Big Ten commissioner, he's leaving to become the president for the Bears. So we'll see how that goes just for the Big Ten conference. But he burned a lot of bridges while he was there. So I think when he had the chance to get away, I'm not really sad that he's leaving. We'll see how that goes at another time. But real quick, why don't we run through the hockey and the lacrosse rankings so that we let everyone see what's going on for them right now, just because for hockey, we're starting to get ready for when they have the tournaments. We have for the men's rankings, Minnesota's number one, Winnipeg is number two, Boston University is number three, Denver is number four, Michigan's number five, St. Cloud State is number six, Ohio State is number seven, Penn State's number eight, Western Michigan's number nine, Harvard's number 10, Cornell's number 11, Michigan Tech's number 13, Michigan Tech's number 12, sorry. Minnesota State is number 13, UConn is number 14, Michigan State's number 15, Omaha's number 16, Northeastern's number 17, Rochester's number 18, Merrimack's number 19, and UMass Lowell round off the top 20 for men's hockey. For women's hockey, and you have the top 15 because they're very close to the tournament. So we have Yale at number one, Ohio State at number two, Minnesota at number three, Colgate at number four, Northeastern at number five, Winnipeg at number six, Minnesota Duluth at number seven, Wisconsin at number eight, Penn State at number nine, Clarkson at number 10, Vermont at number 11, St. Cloud State at number 12, Providence at number 13, Cornell at number 14, and UConn at number 15. So that's for women's hockey. And Bob, are you starting to get ready for lacrosse? Just how did you watch lacrosse at all?
I do watch some lacrosse. We have a good lacrosse team in Lynchburg. Lynchburg Hornets are normally a very much a powerhouse in Division III. So, yeah, you got to get excited about lacrosse.
Yeah, no, I was checking it out and I saw that for men's Division 1 lacrosse with the top 20. So you have UVA at number one. Maryland's already played a game. They're number two. Georgetown season hasn't started yet. Number three. Cornell season hasn't started yet. Number four. Notre Dame season hasn't started yet. Number five. Princeton, same. Number six. Yale, same with them. Number seven. Duke's already played two games. They've won 2-0. They're number eight. Rutgers has played one game. They're 1-0. They're number nine. Penn season hasn't started yet. They're number 10. Ohio State is 1-0. They're number 11. Delaware, they haven't started yet. They're number 12. Harvard hasn't started yet. They're number 13. Boston University is number 14. Their season hasn't started yet. St. Joseph's number 15. Browns number 16. They haven't played a game yet. Denver's number 17. They're 1-0. Jacksonville's number 18. They're 0-1. North Carolina's number 19. They haven't started yet. And Richmond is 0-1, but they're number 20 right now. So we're going to see how that goes. And that's just the beginning polls because we both know that during the season, it's going to change a whole lot. And the women's rankings, because their season has not started yet. You have North Carolina at number one, Maryland at number two, Boston College at number three, Northwestern at number four, Syracuse at number five, Stony Brook at number six, Florida at number seven, Rutgers at number eight, Denver at number 9, Loyola at number 10, Duke at number 11, James Madison at number 12, Virginia at number 13, Stanford at number 14, Princeton at number 15, Notre Dame at number 16, Michigan number 17, USC at number 18, Jacksonville at number 19, Johns Hopkins at number 20, Yale at number 21, Richmond at number 22, UMass at number 23, UConn at number 24, and Colorado rounds off the top 25 for the women's lacrosse for setting up for the year. So how lacrosse is going to be later on, it's definitely looking pretty good. I'm just waiting to see how it goes because we've had a few preview games for the year, so we've had a few of the rankings where the teams have played, but within the next month or two, that's when you're going to see the games start to heat up because usually right around March Madness or just after, that's when you not only have the big rivalry games, but you have the games where the rankings are really going to start to matter. So we're about there, and well, for college basketball, like you said, we're only a few weeks away from just seeing not only the conference tournaments, but Selection Sunday for the NCAA tournament. And just watching how this week went, yeah, for men and women, we definitely better have the red pen out because I would say that we're probably going to be doing a lot more removing and changing for teams this year and this week even.
Yeah, you really got to get your red pen out, like you mentioned, and it's going to be a situation to where you got to think of it this way too. I don't think it's a sprint; it's a marathon. However, it's maybe not a full marathon; it's maybe a half marathon because you got to win a short amount of games in a short amount of time, but you can't be worried about game 2 before you play game 1.
So, if you were going to talk in track terms, would you say it could be more kind of like a steeplechase, how you're having to make sure that you're winning your games, you're jumping over the gate and trying not to get too wet while you're getting your team set up for the conference tournaments?
Well, luckily, I don't think there's any water hazards out there, but yeah, I mean, I do think it's a situation to where you've almost got it. It's almost like maybe an 800 or a 1600 or maybe even a relay because you definitely need your guys or girls, depending on the ladies, depending on what sport you're looking at, is you've got to get your guys, you got to get your team to be cohesive. So, I mean, if one person carries the baton, you need that second person to be able to catch the baton when you hand it off to them because if not, when that baton drops, that's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mess.
So true, so true. Well, Bob, if we were going to try to get a hold of you on social media outside of here, how would we do so?
Well, first off, I'd probably say beware, but I would go to the Sports Buffet on Twitter. I'm trying to get the YouTube up going more, youtube.com/the Sports Buffet, Facebook, the Sports Buffet podcast. And chances are, if you really need to reach me in a hurry, somebody knows my number. So just shoot me a text and I'll get back to you at some point.
I understand. I'm going to have to work on getting that one myself since that's the one thing I don't have right now, but we'll cross that bridge later on. If you're going to try to get a hold of me, you would find me on Twitter at Alan F. West. I'm going to post there probably next week or two, just getting ready for the tournament. I am on Instagram at Alan.West.46. Bob, once again, thank you for coming on and helping me do another good show so that way we can make sure we're crossing that bridge one more week to tournament time.
Always appreciate you.
This has been the Top 25 Rundown. Have a good night, everybody.